Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering a fresh, new take on one of the most powerful archetypes in the entire game, the throwing character. We all know that thrown weapon characters are some of the absolutely most powerful characters that you can use in Baldur's Gate 3 for Honor Mode. When I did my list of the top builds for Honor Mode, 2 of the top 5 were thrown weapon users, using Eldritch Knight and Berserker Barbarian, respectively. However, there's actually a secret third class that makes an incredible thrown weapon character, using one of the least used subclasses in the entire game, the Valour Bard. By incorporating thrown weapons into a Valour Bard character, you are able to get not only incredible ranged damage dealing, using one of the most broken mechanics in the game in thrown weapons, but also all of the awesome power of being a full spellcaster, the control and utility and skill access that having a bard in your party brings to the table. So you get a ton of ranged damage, and at the same time, a ton of party utility. This is also unique in that it is pretty much the only thing in the game that Valour Bard actually does better than Swords Bard, because you can't use the Sword Bard special attacks on thrown weapons. So Valour Bard gets to shine with the thrown weapon character, because it's actually brings a lot to the table in terms of thrown weapon attacks, and lets you buff your party, while at the same time contributing awesome damage yourself. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Patrick David Rayner for the $10 donation, Michael Fenn for the $25, and David Proby, Albie Fett, and Markajesus for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really do appreciate the support. It really means a lot. Alright, let's throw some weapons. For our first level, we're going to start off immediately in Bard to reach our full power level as soon as possible. But right from the beginning of the game, we do have one decision to make with regard to our ability scores. This character can either be played with 8 strength and drink an elixir of hill giant strength every day in order to gain the strength we need to effectively throw our weapon. Elixirs of hill giant strength set your strength to 20 regardless of what's on your character sheet, and you can stockpile a bunch of them in Act 1, so you can just drink one every day and not have to put points in strength. But since not everyone likes to drink elixirs every day, you can also just build this character with strength in the character sheet. So I'm going to show you both sets of attribute points so you can decide which one to use. For the non-elixir version of the build, we're going to take 17 strength to get that as high as possible, 14 dexterity, which I consider to be kind of the minimum that you can get away with for Honor Mode in terms of your initiative, 12 constitution, which does leave us relatively squishy, but for a ranged spellcaster that's going to be supporting your party a lot and doing damage at range, you can get away with this. You may want to use attribute items in order to improve these later on down the line, but for the early game this should be fine. 14 charisma to make us as good at dialogue checks as possible, and then our last 2 ability points are going to go into wisdom to increase our saving throws. For the elixir version of the build, which is overall going to be the stronger version of course, because elixirs are such a powerful mechanic, we get to take 8 strength, because we're going to replace that with elixirs, 16 dexterity, which of course is excellent, 15 in Constitution, let me zero these out, 15 in Constitution, and 16 in Charisma, with, again, 10 in Wisdom. This gives us decent saving throws, also gives us a more powerful spellcasting and better conversation skills in the early game, as well as higher initiative, so all of those are really good. I'm going to be showcasing this version of the build, because when you're using thrown weapons, it's such a powerful mechanic anyways, you might as well go all out and use elixirs anyways, but both versions are totally playable, and I will mention differences between them for those of you who don't want to use elixirs. For our skill selection here, we're going to take as many of the dialogue skills as we want to use. Obviously, persuasion is the most important and most powerful of these, so we definitely want that, because this character makes an excellent party face, so of course we want to be proficient in persuasion. If you don't have a dedicated sleight of hand character, like a rogue with expertise in your party, you can drop some of these dialogue skills in exchange for sleight of hand proficiency. And also, of course, you can pick up, like, perception if you are feeling like your party is lacking that as well by dropping performance. Deception and persuasion are the best, too. But for this character, I'm just going to showcase them with all the dialogue skills so you can succeed on dialogue checks as easily as possible. For our cantrip selection, we want Minor Illusion. This is an incredibly important spell. Oh, it looks like I already have the spell set. This is an incredibly important cantrip for every party to have access to, because it lets you split off enemies from their allies and kill them when they're on their own, or group enemies together in order to blow them up with a giant AoE spell. And Friends, which makes us even better as a party face. Friends is dangerous in honor mode, but you can mitigate the downsides by either disguising yourself or leaving the area after using it, or only using it on enemies you were going to fight anyways, and the advantage on charisma checks is just so valuable that I think it's very much worth having this cantrip. For our spell selection, the two most important ones are Healing Word and Dissonant Whispers. Dissonant Whispers is the best early game combat spell for a bard. It locks an enemy in place for 2 turns, which is awesome. Preventing them from moving is really good when you're a ranged spellcaster, and it does decent damage for a level 1 spell slot. And of course, Healing Word lets you heal allies, get them up from prone, apply the buff on heal items, and one of the great things about this character is how powerful its bonus actions are. So getting in another awesome use of a bonus action, in addition to your super powerful main actions with thrown weapons and spells, is really, really good. For our remaining spells, you can either take utility spells like Longstrider, if your party doesn't have access to that already, or Speak with Animals and Disguise Self, stuff like that, or just more combat spells in the form of Tasha's Hideous Laughter, which lets you lock down enemies, Heroism, Thunder Wave, that kind of thing. Any of those are acceptable. The two most important ones are Healing Word and Dissonant Whispers. Finally, of course, before we finalize our character at level 1, we need to make sure we've picked the correct starting instrument, because if you get the wrong one, it will totally ruin your character forever. But once we've done that, we are ready to move on to level 2. At character level 2, we're taking our second level of Bard, getting access, of course, to Jack of all trades, making us better at passing skill checks for our party, and also Song of Rest, increasing the longevity of our party, letting them refresh short rest resources, and also this lets us later on refresh our Bardic Inspiration, which is going to be pretty valuable for us, because the combat inspiration ability of Valor Bards is really good. This is a notable level, not because we get anything super powerful, but because it's emblematic of how this character works. Not only do we get incredible control and support and utility spells, and not only do we get awesome damage, we also support our party in a ton of other ways through skill checks, healing, and additional longevity. So this character just makes an incredibly smooth addition to any party, and will make pretty much whatever you're doing more powerful. For our spell selection at this level, we're going to grab any utility spells that we might want. For our combat option is probably going to be Thunder Wave, because while we can make great melee attacks with this character, any thrown weapon can also be used in melee. It's a secret second mode that they don't tell you about. You sometimes won't want to be surrounded by enemies, and Thunder Wave can help push them away. That's it for level 2. Let's go to level 3. And at character level 3, we get to pick our subclass. Of course, we already know what subclass we're going to pick. It's going to be the College of Valour. College of Valour Bard, many of you have probably never seen this button pressed because it's so rarely recommended. That's actually not because it's not a powerful class. It is in fact an extremely powerful class. It's just that lore and swords are so ludicrously strong that they tend to overshadow it. And Swords in particular does a lot of the same things that Valor does, but better. However, there's one exception. Valor makes a better thrown weapon character than Swords, because you can't use the Swords Bard abilities on thrown weapons. So we get to make the maximal use of this powerful class, so in a way that's not overshadowed by its big brother, and get to use Combat Inspiration as a bonus action while providing incredible damage from our thrown weapons. Combat Inspiration's actually quite a powerful ability. It works as kind of a preemptive cutting words, allowing a character who has the inspiration to increase their armor class in reaction to an enemy attack. So you can prevent your characters from getting hit, or you can increase your damage, which you can double on a critical hit. So if you have a character that's getting lots of crits, this increases your damage output dramatically. The really cool thing about this, though, is that it's a bonus action. So in addition to your awesome main hand attacks and your powerful spells, you have great bonus actions with this character. In Dungeons & Dragons, every character, every turn of combat, has 5 resources they can be using. Their action, their bonus action, their reaction, their movement, and their concentration. And this character has awesome uses for all 5. that means that you're effectively maximizing your character's potential in combat and helping your party do the most that you can, because we have these great bonus actions to pass out to our allies while we ourselves are doing awesome damage. For our spell selection at this level, we're going to pick up Cloud of Daggers. This is a no saving throw damaging spell, which layers on top of the damage we're doing with our thrown weapons, or will be doing next level, especially with our thrown weapons, in order to let us kill enemies very quickly, or finish off low health enemies, big groups of enemies as well. And we're going to replace Thunder Wave, which is probably the least useful of these spells. You can also drop Heroism at this point, for Hold Person. Hold Person is a great spell naturally, but also incredible for this character, because if you hold Person on someone and then are within 10 feet of them, your thrown weapon attacks will critically hit for massive amounts of damage. So you can hold Person an enemy, maybe get haste or drink a speed potion, and then blast them with your thrown weapons to kill them instantly, or at least lock them down for a couple turns while dealing incredible amounts of damage. That's it for level 3. Let's go to level 4. And at character level 4, we get to take our first feat, and of course the feat that we are going to take, because we're a thrown weapon character, is Tavern Brawler. This is why we took the odd number in Constitution or the 17 Strength for the non-Elixir build, because we get an extra point here. So we're going to put this extra point into Constitution to give us 16s across the board, which is pretty nice for this character already. And of course, this lets us double our Strength modifier when we throw a weapon. Since our Strength modifier with the Elixir version of the build is 20, thanks to is plus 5, thanks to having 21 Strength from an Elixir, or with the non-Elixir version is plus 4, thanks to having 18 Strength, that adds a ton of damage and hit chance to all of our attacks. Thrown weapons are broken in Baldur's Gate because Tavern Brawler breaks what's called bounded accuracy, meaning that it just hits more often than the game is balanced around things hitting. And also does way more damage than it should. So it is going to just allow your character to have almost perfect hit chance and incredible amounts of damage output, and in this case, also be a full spellcaster. Speaking of spells, we get an additional cantrip here, and the cantrip that I'm going to recommend here is Blade Ward. Sometimes this character will get surrounded by enemies, and because we're a Valor Bard, we actually have pretty good access to armor and stuff, so we can just be surrounded by enemies, and it's fine. And if you need to stall for a turn for your party, you can Blade Ward yourself for damage resistance, so it can just be a good panic button in an emergency. You can also take Light if you don't think that you're going to have a use for Blade Ward and don't have a good source of light already. For our spell selection here, we're going to pick up Enhance Ability. It's useful in some dialogue checks throughout the game, and we don't need to replace a spell at this point unless there's one that you're really not using or one that you want from this list, because our spell selection is already perfect. At character level 5, we get access to 3rd level spells. And of course, we also, because we are a Valor Bard, get Improved Bardic Inspiration and Font of Inspiration. This lets us pass out even more and better combat inspirations, increasing our utility to our allies dramatically. And of course, we get to get them back on a short rest, so we can do this constantly, especially because we have Song of Rest to refresh them even more frequently. Combat Inspiration just buffs up all your allies and everything they're trying to do, so just more of these is always going to be good. For our spell selection at this level, we're going to go ahead and take Hypnotic Pattern. This lets you lock down one group of enemies and then pick them off one at a time with your powerful thrown weapon attacks. And then I'm going to recommend swapping out Heroism, which we no longer need because you use this for early game fear immunity, and it can help with some healing in the early game, for Glyph of Warding to give us a non-concentration combat spell option. This character doesn't need these as badly as other characters, because we always have a great non-concentration combat option, which is hurl something at the enemy. But Glyph of Warding is just a really great AoE lockdown spell, does a bunch of damage, adds a ton of ice surfaces to the battlefield if you do it that way, so it's just a very powerful spell for bards to have access to as well, and lets you maximize the use of your awesome 3rd level spell slots. At character level 6, we get access to Extra Attack, effectively doubling our damage output with our thrown weapons. This is also only comes one level later than a martial character building into throwing weapons, but so we give up a little bit of damage for one level compared to those characters, but we're also a full spellcaster and bring a ton of utility to the party in the form of dialogue skills, Song of Rest, etc. So while we do give up a little bit of damage compared to the Barbarian or Eldritch Knight versions of the character, we bring a ton of other stuff to the table, which means that you can slot this character in without sacrificing pretty much anything. In addition to that, we get another 3rd level spell, and the one that I'm going to recommend you take here is going to be either Fear or Plant Growth. Plant Growth is really great because it doesn't take concentration. You can stall enemies in it and just throw weapons at them while they slowly work their way through it. Or Fear can be used to disable groups of enemies who are not immune to it and push them away from you. Either of those are good. I'm going to recommend Plant Growth, or of course you can go back for a utility spell from an earlier level. At character level 7, we have a choice to make. Either we can continue to level in Bard, or we can dip into other classes in order to improve our combat potential. Some potential options for this include a 2-level dip in Fighter to get Action Surge and Heavy Armor Proficiency, because you can take the Fighter level at level 1 if you respect for Heavy Armor Proficiency. War Cleric to gain the bonus action attack, letting you choose between Combat Inspiration or just another attack with your bonus action. But I actually just like leveling up in Bard here, because it's going to get us access to higher level Bard spells and magical secrets as soon as possible at level 10. So we're going to take another Bard level, going up to Bard level 7, and get access to 4th level spells. The 4th level spells for Bard are not amazing. There's not a ton that are hugely impactful here, but you can pick up Confusion as another solid disable. You can cast this into a big confused group, as it were, of allies and enemies who are all tangled together, since it only targets enemies, or you can use it to have your enemies attack each other while you throw daggers at them from the sidelines. At Bard level 8, we get our 2nd feat, and since this is Honor Mode, the feat that we're going to take is going to be Alert. 16 Dexterity plus whatever initiative gear we've had up to this point has probably been okay, but we may be starting to struggle with our initiative at this point in the game, so picking up Alert just fixes that immediately. I think that almost every Honor Mode character is going to want Alert, especially one like this that wants to lock down enemies before they go, or just kill them with huge amounts of damage output ahead of time. If for whatever reason you're not interested in taking Alert, you can just take an ability improvement for Charisma, because that'll just make your spellcasting better. Or, of course, if you are the non-Elixir version of the character, you're going to need to replace this feat with an ability improvement for Strength, because you just need your Strength as high as possible for your Tavern Brawler damage. For our other level 4 spell here, we can take Greater Invisibility to give us access to that kind of shenanigan. You can attack while invisible with this character, or with a party member. But if you aren't doing that, then you can just pick up Freedom of Movement. This is a spell that you're not going to cast very often, but if an ally gets stunned, having the option to break them out of it is incredibly important. And this just helps this character power up their party even more by making sure that nothing can go wrong in some of the most difficult encounters in the game. At character level 9, we get 5th level Bard spells, which are, if anything, even more disappointing than the 4th level Bard spells, but do have some pretty powerful options in the form of Hold Monster. Just like Hold Person, the ability to lock an enemy in place and then guarantee critical hits against them is incredibly strong for this character, given the sheer amount of damage we're going to be outputting with our attacks. At character level 10, this is where things get really exciting, because we, of course, get improved Bardic Inspiration, which is nice in and of itself, additional skill expertise, which lets us get Persuasion expertise, for example, but most importantly, we get Magical Secrets. Magical Secrets lets us pick 2 spells from across pretty much any class, letting us pick from some of the most powerful spells in the entire game. Just like with most other Bard characters, one of these spells I'm going to highly, highly recommend be Counterspell. Any character that can have access to Counterspell probably should, and it gives this character an incredible usage of their reaction, because you are able to trade your reaction now for an entire enemy turn, and one of their most important resources, whatever spell they were trying to cast. This character's great at counterspelling, so we're just very happy to pick that one up. Our second spell, we have a lot more leeway with. There's definitely some different options that you can use. Banishing Smite is kind of fun for this character, because you can do a melee Banishing Smite with your weapons. Just because we have thrown weapons doesn't mean we can't attack with them, so we can do a bunch of extra damage there. Conjure Elemental can give you the Elementals and Myrmidons, which are incredibly potent fighters and huge buffs to your party, and you can give them combat inspiration and stuff as well, so the conjured elementals are really awesome for this character. Hunger of Hadar is just game winning in some encounters by itself, of course, because there are some enemies that simply can't deal with it, especially if you layer it with plant growth that we picked up at earlier levels. And even something like Command, just to have a really good control spell, can always be really effective. Or Haste, if you want this character to concentrate on Haste. Though, I typically recommend using Speed Potions for Haste on this character, or having a different character concentrate on it, because you're going to want the control spells that this character has access to be your normal concentrations. I think the best spells here by default are going to be Counterspell and Conjure Elemental, but there's a ton of great magical secrets options, and I highly encourage you to experiment with them and find something that's both fun and powerful for the way that you're building your character. For our cantrip selection here, of course, we're going to take True Strike to strike true at the haters in the comments, and for our spell selection, at this level, you probably have a pretty good idea of what utility spells you need from earlier levels. There's not a lot here at the high levels that excites us, so you can go back for just some utility spell, like, I don't know, maybe Silence that your party might want at this point, or Invisibility just to make some out-of-combat stuff a little easier. At this point in the game, you should have a great sense of what your party might need from these earlier spell levels. At character level 11... Again, we could take 2 fighter levels at this point in order to gain Action Surge, but I really just like continuing to level in Bard for this character, because you already do pretty much everything that this character needs, so just gaining more spell levels is really great for us. And of course we get access to 6th level spells, including the incredibly awesome Otto's Irresistible Dance, which lets us just lock down even the most dangerous bosses in the game for a turn, and just win combats that way. An enemy that's dancing can't do anything, and you can gain advantage on your attack rolls if you have like a hasted attack that you can do against this enemy. Then you can throw your weapons at them while they are dancing, which is rude, but obviously even in honor mode, sometimes you just have to be a little dishonorable to get ahead. Finally, at character level 12, again, all of those dips are still on the table, but we're just going to finish this character off with a 12th level of Bard, because it keeps our save DC and Charisma, which is important for Illithid Powers. This character, by the way, is one of the best Illithid Power users in the game, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, but also lets us get another feat, which lets us do an ability improvement for Charisma, getting our Charisma up to 18. At this point, of course, our save DCs have suffered a little bit, so we'll want to have compensated for that with save DC gear, but boosting our Charisma here makes sure that we're able to do that, and then combined with story events and gear that increases our Charisma, we will be able to end the game with a pretty nice, a pretty respectable Charisma value. For our spell, again, at this point, you should have an idea of what utility spells you might need from earlier levels, so just pick based on that. Anything that your party might need at this point can be pretty good. Or you can just take Eyebite to have fun, because it's just an awesome spell that can win some encounters as well on its own. Alright, that is... whoops, clicked too fast. But that is the Valour Bard Thrower, bringing all of the power of one of the most broken damage and weapon fighting mechanics in the entire game in thrown weapons, and all of the awesome power of the utility, control, and spellcasting that the full spellcasting Bard gets in a single package. Of course, though, we can improve this character even further with item selection and Illithid powers, so let's talk about those. 4 items for this character. The awesome thing about this character is that in addition to all the power you bring, you're actually extremely item independent, which lets you slot into pretty much any party without interfering with other characters' items. Of course, you will want the powerful throwing items available to you, the thrown weapons that return to you, such as Nirolna, that have the thrown weapon property, and also will return to your hand when thrown, are the ones that you're looking for. Since we don't have an Eldritch Knight weapon bond, we need these weapons to be able to constantly throw them. I also highly recommend carrying just a stockpile of daggers and hand axes and javelins, just to chuck things at enemies. You can use these to start combats without having to invest your real throwing weapon, because there's a bug where when you initiate combat with a thrown weapon, it won't always return to you. But Nirolna is, of course, the best of these. In addition to that, the Ring of Flinging that boosts your thrown damage is awesome for any thrown weapon character. And because we're a Valor Bard, we get shield proficiency, which lets us use powerful shields like the Ketherix shield or the Sentinel shield to boost our save DC and our initiative, especially before we get access to Alert. Of course, this character needs elixirs of Hill Giant Strength if you're going the elixir build, and then later Cloud Giant Strength in order to function, so you definitely want one of those to allow your weapons to actually hit. And since we don't get a ton of charisma early on, we want boosts to our spell save DC with things like the Fistbreaker Helm that give you additional save DC, and the Helldust Gloves that both give you weapon attack damage and spell save DC in a single package, which is, of course, awesome for this character that's doing both. You want a solid set of medium armor, though honestly, your armor is not that important to this character, so whatever medium armor the rest of your party doesn't need will probably suffice. The Armor of Agility is the best defensive version, though, if you don't have another character that needs it more. This character also probably wants a source of Misty Step, because it doesn't naturally get it, so an item like the Amulet of Misty Step or the Disintegrating Nightwalkers goes a long way to giving you a little bit more control over your positioning. The Birthright Hat is also very much worth mentioning, because this character naturally stops at 18 Charisma, so increasing that for your dialogue skills and your save DCs in the late game can be very, very useful. But for the most part, this character can wander around just equipped in whatever equipment the rest of their party doesn't need, plus the thrown weapon and strength elixir, because that's all that you need to succeed, and you will do very, very well, which lets you slot into pretty much any party very easily. Finally, it's worth mentioning that this character makes one of the absolute best Illithid Power users in the entire game, because we both are casting spells and have high save DCs, and we're a monoclass character, so we can use all of the Illithid Powers that have save DCs in order to, at their full potential. And also we're making weapon attacks, so all of the Illithid Powers that key off of making weapon attacks are also going to be improved. And the Displace weapon power sometimes works when you throw weapons at enemies, so we get even more value out of Displace. When you're above an enemy and you throw a weapon at them, the damage there counts as falling damage, so you get the extra damage from Displace. So this character uses pretty much all of the Illithid powers to their maximum possible effect, in a way that almost no other characters in the game do, and you can really gain a ton of benefit from all of the Illithid powers. Luck of the Far Realms, of course, is a really solid one, and Favorable Beginnings, because we're a party face, we're going to be making a lot of ability checks. So we really use every single aspect of our Illithid powers, and you can pretty much just take any of them. In order, you're going to want Favorable Beginnings, Luck of the Far Realms, up to Displace, and you want Cull the Weak as early as possible as well. But these two are the first ones that you're going to take. But honestly, any Illithid power for this character is a huge bonus, because you're so good at using them. So I highly recommend that this be your Illithid power user, which makes sense because it's your party face and everything as well. And if you get bonus action Illithid powers from the Zaith'isk, then you can use those alongside your weapon attacks for even more value. Alright, my friends, I hope that you have enjoyed this look at the Valor Bard Thrower. I think this is just such a cool take on a character, because we get to actually maximize the strengths of a class that very rarely gets seen, and also is a very, very powerful character. You do sacrifice a little bit of damage compared to the other thrown weapon characters, of course, because you don't have the additional attacks that you get from Action Surge or the bonus action Rages from Berserker Barbarian and Thief Rogue. But in exchange for that, you get full Bard spellcasting and all the awesome utility from Bard. So while you give up a little damage, you gain a ton of extra value in return, making this an incredibly powerful addition to any party. As always, of course, if you have enjoyed the video, I really appreciate it if you take the time to hit like and leave a comment down below. It definitely helps me out with the algorithm, so I really do appreciate you taking the time to do that. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 strategy guides and other strategy game analysis. And also, I guess I should mention that we are at 95 channel members. So if you want to be channel member number 100, then the chance is now open to you, and that would be kind of exciting for me at least. So, you know, for those of you who've been so generous as to donate, I of course appreciate that very much. All right, my friends, I really appreciate you watching, and I will catch you next time.